everyone, and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional. I'm your host, Sandy Lowries, and as always, the Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to us by WB40 or Women Beyond 40 magazine. You can check out WB40 at WB40.com. Today in the confessional, our very special guest is an innovative woman who wears many hats. Her name is Jenn Donovan. Jenn is a marketing thought leader who's been helping other small businesses to actually grow their platform via strategic marketing, but she's also a social entrepreneur. She is the founder of two incredible platforms, Buy from a Bush Business and Spend With Us, two platforms that are helping to support small and micro businesses that are actually run by people out in rural communities of Australia who've been hit hard by drought, bushfires, COVID-19, and Jenn is helping to make sure that those businesses are seen and that people are buying from them. She is an innovative leader, and I'm really excited for everyone to meet her today. Welcome to the confessional, Jenn Donovan. Hello and welcome to the confessional, Jenn Donovan. How are you?
Oh, it's good, Sandy. I'm so excited to be here and have a chat on this podcast. I've been looking forward to it.
I am super excited as well because, my confession today is that I had to actually reschedule you and push you out. So I'm so glad and grateful that we could make this work today because I know you're really busy and everybody is. And I just want to say thank you and welcome.
Oh, my absolute pleasure.
So I really wanted to talk about you. You wear so many different hats, Jenn, realistically. So
like every woman, I think. I think like every woman wears too many hats, but yes, thank you.
So, you're a mum of three. You're the wife of a farmer. You are, to just jump in any time if I'm wrong about any of this, but you were
I'm the worst farmer's wife in the world. There you go. There's my first confession. I'm the worst farmer's wife in the world. To the point where, like, my children play football in the local football team, and on the way to football, I will say to my husband, "What do the crops look like? How much rain have we had? What are we growing? What are we lambing at the moment?" So when Mr. Farmer sits next to me at the football and starts talking farming, I've got answers, and he thinks I'm a good farmer's wife. But really, I've just asked my husband on the way to the footy all these questions, so I've got something to say. So that's what makes a bad farmer's wife.
Hey, I see that as innovative. I just think that you're, good research skills there, Jenn. You've got all the answers. That makes you a good wife. But beyond that, you were a property law specialist who then changed careers and sort of decided to go into something else. So you are an innovator. You're a small business champion. You are fascinated by other people doing small business and you help to support them. But you're also, and something that I'm massively interested in, is that you're a social entrepreneur and you have founded two pretty incredible platforms, one of which is Buy from a Bush Business and Spend With Us. Do you want to talk to us about that and how that started?
Yeah. Thank you for all those kind words for a start. You always find it hard. Why do we find it hard to be complimented? Goodness me, maybe that's my second confessional. We've got into it fast, haven't we?
We just got there quickly.
Thank you.
Efficient. She doesn't muck around. We're right into confessions.
That's right. I'm all about making things simple. So I guess Spend With Us and Buy from a Bush Business, they've come into my life very organically. Buy from a Bush Business is a Facebook group which I started in October 2019, so it's almost 2 years since I started that. That came about from being a farmer's wife in some ways, and being a social media and marketing coach and mentor. So pre-pandemic, which of course that was, it's hard to believe that we were in horrific drought at that stage. Like, so much has changed since then. But as farmers in the Riverina of New South Wales, where I live, it was quite a horrific and prolonged drought. And as a social media marketing coach and mentor, I used to travel around and do workshops for, in local towns and talk to small business owners, both service and retail, based on, how they could actually improve their online presence and, improve their marketing and things like that. And that particular week I had been around to 4 different towns, not far from where I live, on a bit of a tour. And it was coming up Christmas. And if you live in a small town, or a small town that relies on agriculture, if farmers don't have money, towns don't have money. That's just the way it goes. So, of course, coming into Christmas, no one was excited because they knew there just wasn't the money in the town, and they relied so heavily on that foot traffic. And this is something I heard all week. Buy from the bush was trending hashtag on Instagram at the time, but I don't know a lot of your listeners if they're small business owners, but back 2 years ago, most of them didn't really understand Instagram. They kind of knew a little bit, but how do you use hashtags? How do you get seen? But everyone knew how to use Facebook. So I started a Facebook group, invited my friends, invited my clients, and kind of just organically did that. Had absolutely no idea that it was going to blow up like it did. I think I had 100,000 people in that group by Christmas time. So within 2 months, there was 100,000 people in that group. As we stand recording now, I think there's 338,000. So that's, I guess we'll hit about 340, 350 by the time we tick over 2 years. And that's all about supporting rural and regional small businesses. Of course, that's a free Facebook group. So a lot of my volunteer time goes into that. And I can say with all honesty that I have seen the absolute best of humanity through that group and the worst of humanity through that group. It has been a real eye-opener as a community leader in there. And I guess Spend With Us sort of came about, Lauren and Sarah, who are my business partners in that, they had started Spend With Us, which is an online marketplace. So think Amazon, but only for rural and regional small businesses, through the bushfires. So wanting to help people that obviously could no longer have foot traffic and needed to get online quickly. And what I sort of saw from my group was that things fell really quickly to the bottom of the group because it was so big. There was so many people posting in there. And so I wanted to sort of try and help them in another way, such as a marketplace, but didn't want to do it on my own. So I just reached out to Laura and Sarah. We'd done a couple of collaboratives before this and said, are you interested in joining forces and I guess take over the world in a rural and regional small business way? And so in August last year, August 2020, we joined together to what you see today, which is just having such a huge impact on small, rural and regional businesses. It really does warm my heart to think of the impact I will have, or we will have, on people we'll never meet. Like that is just, I've always had a philanthropic type yearn inside me, and I think that this could be it.
I think it's fantastic. And look, I am so blown away by what you were doing. So I had friends personally that were impacted during those bushfires. They were in Malakuta. It was terrifying and frightening for so many people. And so many people were displaced. And, I know even for our overseas listeners that, the Australian bushfires was everywhere globally on the news because of the devastation and the landmass and everything that was impacted. But in amongst all of that, of course, is the human stories, and it is the people who lost their homes and their livelihood, and a lot of people whose businesses were really massively impacted during that time. So I am so grateful to people like you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'd say it still is. I think that's the one thing that COVID perhaps has taken away from those people who were devastated in the bushfires is we've kind of forgotten them is the wrong word, but they're still struggling. Like I still know people that have not got a house built yet and are still living in caravans or caravan parks or still haven't got the fences back on their farms or haven't been able to restock. And I think, that's, coming up nearly 2 years on. And I think, so, I guess them knowing that they're still being heard on some platforms and still being understood is really important as well. That hasn't really gone away. It's just that a pandemic came and stole the limelight from them.
Yeah, look, it's so true. And what we forget is on the tail end of all of that, that COVID is actually impacting those businesses still as well. And that getting as many of those small businesses to have an online presence has been really important, I'm guessing, to them being able to sustain the business and keep it going.
Yeah, and I think two things COVID has done, well, two things that I'm going to say now. Obviously, it's done billions of things, but it's changed the way certainly Australians want to support small businesses. I think, I think back again to the drought that we were in and all those millions and millions and millions of dollars that were raised through telethons and on different TV stations. And no offence to everybody who did that. That was marvellous. But we didn't see any of that as drought-ridden farmers, and my area didn't see any of that I know of. So where did all that money go? I'm sure it went to the absolute people who needed it. But now you can help those people in grassroots. You can actually buy a product from them and know that it's going straight into their bank account. And I think Australians have really embraced that side of giving and really wanting to help support small rural and regional businesses, but do it their way by actually buying their products that they sell. And also, I think the other thing the pandemic has done is it has fast forwarded online shopping for Australia by about 5 years at least. We love our country, but when you compare us to the US and maybe even the UK, we were behind as far as online shopping goes. Some people say 10 years, other people say 5 years, but we've caught up, and we've caught up in the last 18 months. So people needed to get online, and they needed to get online quickly, and now they need to stay online.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I know even for us over here at WB40 as a platform, that our magazine sells online, we're about to launch merch, all of that stuff. But without an online presence, I'm not sure that this business could have ever really, been launched as successfully as it has been. So, and one of the things that we like to do, and I'm really happy to say that when we launched our magazine for the first time, we give free ad space and sometimes editorial to different businesses who are supporting other women in small and micro businesses, and you were one of those businesses. So
and we were very thankful for that. It's always a lovely surprise when someone reaches out and says, "Hey, we see you. We'd like to do something for you in return," because really, it's helping the businesses that we support as well as spread the brand awareness. So we were eternally grateful for that.
Yeah, and because we saw it as being something that was really important, and although we support various different charities and non-profits in that way, yours was one of the very first. And I think that what was going on in this country was so monumental in terms of drought, in terms of bushfires, and to get that word out there that there are businesses out there who need our help and support was really massive. And so what kind of impact has this made to your life doing this? Because clearly you're a marketing expert and as you say, you're sort of very grounded in helping other businesses to thrive and be seen. And but in terms of the human thing, how did this change your life being involved with these businesses?
Yeah, look, in a lot of positive ways and a few not so positive ways. Like I said before, I've seen the very best of humanity and I've seen the very worst of humanity. And if anyone has ever worked in retail before, whether it's either online or bricks and mortar, you always seem to go to bed at night remembering the person who said something horrible to you, not the 300 people that said something nice to you. So some days it's been hard. And I think some days people forget, and I know that, I've got friends that are very successful on eBay and places like that, and they forget, the person sending an email forgets that there's a human on the other end of that reads it, that has human feelings. So sometimes the impact has been hard to deal with, but otherwise, it's just been amazing. Again, to impact people you will never meet, to impact communities that you'll never go to, really is, it's just so good for the soul. I just, and we're not finished yet. We've got a long way to go, most certainly. But I really love that, I've seen a lot, probably more so in the Buy From a Bush business group when it's sort of been starting and working, that we took people who might have made a product or, had a product, whether they made it or not, and, their mum might buy it or their sisters might buy it or something like that. But all of a sudden it was a business because Australia wanted to buy it, and no longer did they know everybody who wanted to buy their products. So not only have we helped businesses, but we've helped create businesses, which is a whole different level of, I guess, impact in some ways. I know myself as a farmer's wife, like the drought that we were sort of in when just before COVID, it wasn't the worst one. I remember, back in 06, 07, it was really bad. And I remember I was the breadwinner that time. My husband was the farmer and I was working in law, and, it was up to me to put food on the table. So I know the impact that farmers' wives or women in agriculture sometimes feel when agriculture's just not putting food on the table.
Yeah, and that's really difficult, and especially when, for a lot of farmers, they come from farming families. So we're talking generations of farming communities who are really feeling the impact, and a lot of farmers, unfortunately, who walked away from farms because they literally had no choice. So, and this is right across Australia, and I know for anyone listening in the, US, because we do have a few people over there, the California bushfires were extraordinarily intense as well. And so, we feel for them. But the way that Australia is built, I guess, if you like, it's difficult for people to actually comprehend how so many different things were going on in so many different states across Australia. There was a huge drought going on in WA. There were massive bushfires raging through Victoria, South Australia, New South Wales, Queensland, drought in Queensland, northern New South Wales, a whole lot of things. So,
and then northern New South Wales
got
hit by floods.
Thing that if a woman has her own business, it's an additional income when you're a farmer, and when you're a farmer's wife, if you like, or the partner of a farmer, to bring something to the table and to feel less insecure. Would that be true?
I'm so sorry, you froze. So
that's okay. I can ask again.
About the last 20 seconds or so.
No, that's fine. I was just saying that because we can edit that, so don't worry. I was just saying that when when you're working on a farm, and if your partner has an additional job and is building a business online, that can sometimes help, I'm assuming, to feel less insecure financially.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, I know myself, I want to contribute in some way. Like even when my babies were little and, I remember I was running my property law business, I wouldn't get away with it now. Like, there was no internet really. There was no Skype calls, like, breastfeeding, talking to other solicitors, trying to on hold to the banks and, and feeding babies and things like that, changing dirty nappies, but it was what needed to be done at the time. And, I loved that time as well, but it was a lot of pressure. So I get it from that angle as well, that, there's a lot of people out there that want to contribute to their household. Not that our platform is just for women, obviously, but they were the stories that I saw coming through at the time.
Yeah, wow. And that's very true. I think one of the great things, though, is that I've actually bought from a number of businesses that I actually found on your platform. So I think had your platform not been there and that message had not been getting out there, a lot of us who are in, I'm in Melbourne and, obviously city dwellers wouldn't have necessarily seen those businesses. And there's some extraordinary businesses out there.
Yeah, there is. There's some extraordinary businesses, some extraordinarily talented artists, and I must admit, I've got a bit of a soft spot for highlighting the artists that live in rural and regional Australia. But it was going back probably maybe 18 months ago now. I actually wrote a press release, and it was all about, if you want to support small business, you won't find them on page 1 of Google. Like most small business owners who are solopreneurs, or just mum and dad businesses, you find them on page 6, 7 and 8 of Google when you're trying to search something, because they're working in their business, not necessarily on it. So, so I think, the platform was a really good way of highlighting the ones that just weren't coming up on Google searches and they couldn't get foot traffic anymore. And it was just, I guess, a win for them.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And as you know, here at WB40, we're mad for female artists. We love them. And every one of our magazines has featured the artwork of a different female artist, which is incredible. One of which who was incredible Australian Indigenous artist, Cherie Stokes. And so I think that being able to find out about these people, studios, businesses, and there's so many people out there. So obviously we'll put all the links up after this podcast in our show notes, so everyone is going to jump in there and hopefully find some really cool things. But in terms of Christmas coming up, what would your recommendations be?
Well, I guess my first recommendation, which I think is a little bit cool, is that we have a gift card on Spend With Us. So basically you can go and buy a gift card from $10 up to $500, but you can spend it in any store on the whole entire platform. So you could buy that as a gift. In fact, we've had a few corporate companies come and buy them for staff incentives or last year's staff Christmas presents. So, and they can buy from all sorts of different stores, not just one store. So I love that idea, because then, you kind of get to choose, the recipient gets to choose what they want. And it's also kind of like me in a lolly shop. I don't know if everyone's addicted to lollies like I am, but me in a lolly shop, it's just like, oh, I want that and I want that and I want that. Otherwise, I guess for Christmas, it is, there's the whole pre-Christmas thing at the moment, like the baubles and the Santa sacks and the Santa hats and all those things that you can get monogrammed and really make that personalised gift. Secretly, it's probably not very good to say secretly on a podcast, but we've actually just obtained our liquor license. So that will be going up soon. That we'll be able to have some beautiful boutique wineries and breweries on there. So hopefully not only will they have some beautiful products, but maybe some beautiful hampers as well, like to send to other people. And then I guess the other sort of gifts are around, that is whole Australian made. Like, we're not just about Australian made, but gosh, there's some amazing people out there who are just so talented that I take my hat off to them. I really don't have a creative bone in my body, as far as I can't knit, I can't sew, I can't crochet, I can't paint, but I can talk.
Well, just so you know, you're in the, we're in the club together here, because my mother was an extraordinary quilter. She made beautiful quilts. She could knit, sew, she, crochet, all of it. She was a great baker. I am none of the above. I can't do any of that stuff either.
No, absolutely not. And, probably another confessional for the podcast is I used to own a kitchen shop. So prior, when I got out of law, I got into retail with my best friend, and we had a shop that we bought and called the Kitchenware Queens. Neither of us could cook or bake. For 7 years, we faked it till we made it, or we watched videos, or we learnt from other people, and we used the products and, gave them our feedback. But yeah, it was like, a lot of people would say, you can't cook. Well, how come you've got a kitchen shop? It's just like, no, you're right. But just listen.
I can't cook, but you all should be cooking with my products.
Yeah, that's right. With good quality ones.
That's right. People still cook, right? So, look, I love that, because, at the end of the day, people are always going to buy cookware. That's what I think anyway.
A bit of a testament that marketing works.
And a bit of a testament to the fact that you have become really, I know you don't like compliments, but you've become a bit of a marketing queen in your own right. So there you go, cookware queen becomes marketing queen. But you really are. I mean, I think the other thing that some people here listening to this for the first time may not know about you, Jenn Donovan, is that you're also a successful podcaster in your own right. So you have a massive following on your podcast, and I want to make sure I get this right. Small Business Made Simple podcast.
That is right.
Which is available over on Apple Podcasts amongst other places, and that's where I listen to it. And I do listen to it, and it's just very, very good. Really practical, brilliant, like advice and help, tips and tricks, if you like, if you're a small business owner.
Yeah. And, the name is hopefully what people get out of it, like Small Business Made Simple. That's kind of my philosophy. I just want to make things simple for people with it. But I actually have 2 podcasts with a third one coming. So I told you I could talk and I had a talent for talking. But I also have a podcast called Stories from the Bush, which is the one related to Spend With Us, Buy From a Bush Business, which season 2 will be out shortly. So that's really just storytelling, hearing from people who own businesses in rural and regional Australia. And my third one is actually all about my area. So it's called Along the Murray. I live on the Murray. And again, it's just all interviews, just trying to highlight our area coming into Christmas and the summer season with the tourism. We've got this really unique opportunity we are very tourism-based part of Victoria and New South Wales, but without international travel, or international travel perhaps being too expensive this Christmas for a lot of people if it does open up, we've got this real opportunity for rural Australia or regional Australia to attract more visitors. So I'm like, how can I help? Oh, I can talk. I can do a podcast.
And there's nothing wrong with that. So, but I love that idea. I mean, obviously, this podcast that we're chatting on now, my little baby really was born out of a passion for wanting other women to be able to share their stories. And so I love that you are actually doing, stories from the bush and being able to give a platform to a whole lot of people that may not actually have the opportunity to talk about their stories, their journeys and their businesses.
Yeah, and a lot of people that I do interview, it's like, well, this is my first podcast interview. They're really, they've listened to podcasts, and people who don't podcast seem to think about podcasting as this extra special, amazing thing. Whereas you and I, it is a lot of work, but it's something that everybody can do. And so I love that, people are willing to step outside their comfort zone. They've never been on a podcast before, but they understand that, it could help them in their business. And as a marketing expert, I don't know of another thing that you can do to hold someone else's attention for so long without them getting distracted. That's the power of a podcast. So that's why I think, it's just such a powerful marketing tool, whether it's about your business or about other people's businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as you say, podcasts actually impact people in very different ways. I know we've had some extraordinary women on this podcast, and then we have other people contact us and say, I had never heard of this woman. How have I never heard of this woman? What an extraordinary story. Look at the incredible things that she is doing. That's the joy in it, right? Because it's very much a human connection in podcasting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm all about the human-to-human connection. I think it's, one thing that's missing from so many people's marketing is that, that human relationship that you build, or you should be building, and the community aspect that you're creating as well. I just wish that we had a statistic that would show us who's listening to the podcast. Like a certain percentage of people reach out, and, over time you sort of get to know some people. But, there's a lot of people who listen who, they think that you're their best friend, but unfortunately they haven't reached out for you to get to know them. So I would love to see that in the future, that, we could kind of work out, just like we can see who follows us on social media. It'd be really good to see who was listening to our podcast. Yeah, not in a creepy way.
No, but I agree with you. It's really lovely. And for me, one of the greatest joys is when people actually reach out and you do make that connection with them, and they say, oh, I really loved this episode and this is why. Or, wow, I heard that episode and it actually reminded me of this incredible woman that I know, and maybe you could talk to her. And so I find that it's a really fantastic way of building a community as well. I don't know that I've ever finished a podcast where whoever has been the guest on the podcast hasn't said, you know who else you should be talking to? And they always recommend someone. I find that mind-blowing, but really I think for women it's a very easy thing to do, to kind of go, you know what, I've got a story for you, and then they introduce you to someone, right? I think it's so lovely. I don't know. Look, all of my guests are female, so I can't really talk to whether or not men do that or not. I'm not really sure. But every female podcaster that I have spoken to has said the same thing, that women will always recommend someone else.
Testament to community building. Love it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It's really lovely. So tell us about, your main business obviously is marketing, and tell us how you got into that, because to go from law into marketing for some people seems like a huge step. So how did that come about?
Yeah, it was probably a huge step, but a very huge step that was probably had 1,000 little steps in between. So I guess, as I was talking about before, my property law I was doing when my kids were little, and certainly I was the breadwinner during that really horrific drought that we were going through, not the one just gone, the one before that. And when that sort of broke and things got a little bit better, my best friend and I had way too much wine to drink one night, and we decided that we were going to throw in our corporate jobs and go and buy a small business and become our own bosses. And I just remember my husband going, yeah, it's time for you to have some fun. Just go and buy a business, have some fun. I think we offered them a ridiculous amount of money, or ridiculously small amount of money. They said yes. Before we knew it, we had a shop, and we were playing shop. We bought it to play shop, and it was probably, I reckon it was about 2 months in, and it was kind of like, this could work. This actually could be a really good business. People are coming in, and people are, asking for products, and they're coming back. And so it was a real, we had no retail experience between us. We just really bought it for fun. And so that sort of set me off on a path of, well, what does growing a business look like? So it was probably about 12 months in that I got myself a marketing mentor or a business mentor. And I think Facebook and Instagram looked very different back then. So I've kind of feel like I've grown with the platform, and my knowledge has grown with the platform, with what works, what doesn't work, what's next type of thing. And so that's where I pretty much found my love for social media and marketing, was just through trying to build my own business, trying to build a retail business that, had its own problems, droughts, algae outbreaks, mouse plagues, floods, you name it. There was always something going on that you sort of had to get over as a hurdle, not to mention algorithms and things like that. It's just when we sold the business, so we had it for 7 years, that was always the plan. We had a 7-year plan. We knew it wasn't forever. And after I finished that, the guy who was actually my business mentor for about 5 years in that business rang me up and asked me if I wanted to go into business with him and do the social media marketing for all his members. And I'm like, oh, do you think I'm good enough for that? And so I started doing that, and that lasted about 18 months, probably nearly 2 years, but it was in Melbourne. It was very Melbourne based. I'm 3.5 hours from Melbourne, young kids, farmer, you can't move a farm. So spent far too much time away from home. So I ended up giving up that partnership and started on my own, which is about 4 years ago now. So, so I guess it was born out of necessity to grow my own business and just wanting to learn, and then wanting to pass on the information that I knew.
Yeah, and pass it on you do, because I don't know, how many episodes of your business podcast have you had so far?
I think tomorrow I'm releasing 155.
Wow. That's a lot. It's a lot of work, Jen.
It is a lot. I actually thought I did it because when I obviously there's a marketing and social media coach for probably every street in Australia. So how do you stand out? So that was kind of one of I can stand out by putting my voice out there, by putting my expertise in people's ears. But I honestly thought I'd run out of things to say at about 27. I had, about 20 episodes mapped out before I started. I thought I know about 7 good people that can kind of come on my podcast, and that will fill a few more episodes. And here I am, still talking.
Well, if there's anybody out there who's listening who's a small business, especially a small business, in a remote kind of area or from the bush or whatever, what are some quick tips and tricks you could tell them? What are the most important things they should be doing for their business?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of them we've kind of talked about in our own experiences, but showing up on your social media. So many small business owners that I come across hide behind their logos and their products and their services, whereas I think we want that human connection. We want to know who the people are behind the business. And if you take social media away, that's the way we used to have to do business. People had a bricks and mortar store or, sold things at markets, and therefore you actually met the person who owned the business, who was selling the products. You had that human connection. So I think that's probably the one thing that I see that people can do straight away to get a really big lift through their community is actually start showing up for their community. The second thing is community. I find that small business owners, not all of them, but a lot of them keep chasing the sale. They forget about all the people who've already bought from them, who already know, like, and trust them, and they forget to market back to the people or remind the people who've already purchased from them that, they're treasured. You're part of my community. I love you. Please, spread the word, become a referrer, become a fan. So they're probably the 2 biggest things I can think of is, what are you doing to get the people who have already bought from you to come back and buy again? What does that strategy look like? Are you showing up for your audience, and are you building a community, or are you just building a business?
Oh, I love that. And one of the things that I decided when we were starting WB40, and obviously this is the podcast, the Good Girl Confessional is the podcast of WB40, that above everything was the most important thing to us was community, even over sales. And I think that has really kind of lifted and driven where we are in such a short amount of time, because without community, really, who are you?
Yeah. And I think it's human nature that we want to belong to something. We just, I think this is how, some bad things happen in the world, because people want to belong to something and someone sells them the story and it makes them feel like they belong. But at the end of the day, that's what we're looking for. So if you're building a community of people who belong, then I think your longevity of your business is more guaranteed than if you're just continually chasing the next sale.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, you've built an incredible brand and a brilliant business and a community, but in doing so, you've also then been able to create something that gives back to so many businesses doing it tough out there in the bush, dealing with, everything from drought to bushfires to COVID, and, for people not to be able to travel into those places makes it really difficult for any bricks and mortar stores. So I think, that must be such an extraordinary thing every night when you go to bed, that you've done something brilliant for someone else.
Thank you. That's so lovely. But I think I'm a bit tired when I go to bed to think about
Not surprising.
It's kind of like head hits the pillow and all the thoughts go until 3 o'clock. We've all got that 3 o'clock brainwave idea, haven't we, that wakes us up every now and then. But yes, a little bit tired by the end of the day.
Well, if you're like me, some of the best ideas I have happen at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mine are in the bath. In the bath.
Oh, really?
So I have a lot of baths. I'm a little bit partial to the bath. And you'll often see me come dripping wet with the towel running up to the office to write something down before I forget. So
I love that, because that was going to be one of the questions I asked you before we finished up is, what do you do to unwind as a woman in business because you're so busy? But clearly having a bath is an excellent one.
Yeah, having a bubble bath. I'm a huge kid. I love bubbles. Have a bubble bath and just, relax and just let all the thoughts go.
I love it. And, here's my tip for that one is make sure that you have like a little notebook and a pen near the bath. Then you can stay in the bath longer.
Yeah, I've often looked at that, those waterproof things that you can buy for your phone. It's like, I wonder if they would work.
Well, it's really funny. My daughter's actually got one and she has it in the she's a bath person. She loves the bath. And she bought it for her smartphone and sits in there and she can watch things and record things and,
there you go. Maybe it does work.
We'll never see you again, Jen. You'll be living in the bath.
I'll be very wrinkly.
Oh, I love it. Well, I wanted to say a huge thank you for coming into the confessional today and for making me laugh because I'm down here in Melbourne still in lockdown, under lockdown restrictions. So this has been an absolute delight and joy. You are an extraordinary woman doing brilliant things for so many people out there. And I just know that our listeners are going to love your story.
Oh, you are so kind. And, straight back at you. You're doing amazing things. Like, I think Katrina McCarter, I did an interview with her a little while ago, and she's talking about the invisible generation, which is like that 40 plus. So just the fact that you are shining a light on the absolute talent and amazing women who are over 40, I think that's just brilliant. And I love speaking to other people who are doing brilliant things as well. So thank you for having me on. But, well done to you too. This is awesome.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Look at us. See, this is what the world should be, women helping other women to rise up because, yes, that is our passion over here, is shining a light on the incredible amount of women out there over the age of 40, 50, 60 and beyond doing incredible things just like yourself. So thank you so much. I will put up all the links in our show notes and on our social media when we launch this podcast so everyone can find you, Jen, and everyone can find Spend With Us and Buy From the Bush and all of your podcasts. There is so much valuable information and I really hope everybody jumps on board and goes on that journey with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much again.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is brought to you by WB40, Women Beyond 40 magazine. Available now at WB40.com. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to quality podcasts. We're also now available on YouTube. We chat with really interesting women about their hard-won wisdom, but it really helps us if you can subscribe, like, and share the podcast. Thanks so much for your support. Bye for now.